Hello, folks, and welcome back to another episode of CamBro Conversations with your host, Colin Campbell. And today I'm joined by Miss Talia Bentley. Talia is a full-time performance analyst in professional football, an online coach, an all-round good egg on Instagram. Talia, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Delighted to have you on. And it's been long overdue having you on, and we've been talking about this episode for a little bit of time, and
we have.
I think there's so much to go into with your approach to fitness, your background in sports science from university, although I'm doing a bit of a spoiler in your intro probably. but I'm really looking forward to bringing this to the audience, because not only do you have a real niche knowledge, but you also have a fantastic perspective on fitness and general approach to life that I think people will be loving to hear. So without any further ado, Talia, do you want to give us a bit of an overview of yourself?
Sure, yeah. So I am Talia, obviously. 23 and a sports science university graduate. So I actually haven't always been into the gym. We'll probably cover this a little later on, but I did have an eating disorder for some years, which then kind of spurred my gym love throughout my recovery, which is then why I kind of got into sport and science and learning about the body. It kind of sparked some sort of passion in me. And then when I was studying, I volunteered at Watford Football Club, kind of in all the departments. I was just kind of giving it a go as a volunteer. I was literally doing whatever I could just to get some experience. And then towards the end of my years studying, they said, if you can get first, we will offer you a place as part of the team full time. And then I did. So ever since then, it's been like kind of a permanent contract. So I work a lot on the nutrition side of things in terms of the analysis there, and kind of coordinate that with the coaches and the performance analysis. And we kind of liaise so that we know it's working harmoniously in terms of all the departments. And yeah, that's kind of my main thing with them. And then I've recently gone freelance with it. So I'm hoping to start on some newer contracts with kind of different teams in different areas as well. So yeah, that's kind of my main
top level background. That sounds good to me, Talia. And I know that it's the areas we've spoken about that you're actually using that degree that you went to study for, which isn't always the case in today's society, but it was a directly transferable degree to go into professional sport and provide that expert guidance. And I don't know about you, but looking at football teams now and rugby teams now, the background staff behind it in order for players and athletes to deliver their absolute best possible performance.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Huge.
It's crazy. It's kind of, I've said this to my parents when kind of explaining what it's like and kind of what their generation is used to in terms of football and rugby and any sport, is the players kind of being taught skills, but it's still a raw game. Whereas now these people are programmed to the exact second of the game. Like everything is planned, which I think is like crazy. I feel like in time we're just going to be robots on a pitch, but
yeah, I think that's the way it's going in order to bring the kind of the most from it. And if you look at the money, particularly in football and in the English game as well, the kind of fans, the TV and everyone expect the absolute top. And that means that the background work has to be of the highest level as well. You can't get away with your kind of maverick players anymore who go out twice a week and turn up on a Saturday a little bit hungover or whatever and just rely on the
exactly.
You don't get many kind of Paul Gascoigne type figures now. It's more these athletes, isn't it?
No, not at all.
To be really, really top.
Definitely, yeah. It's interesting. It's very interesting. I think it's definitely something I enjoy doing. So I know some people kind of don't know what to do in terms of work after a sports science degree. There is so many opportunities. I did an internship with UCL and that was kind of performance based, with track and field athletes,
Okay.
which was really interesting. So if you can literally people love to know that you've worked for nothing. It's a really good attribute to have. So if you can kind of get into anything like that, literally just apply for volunteer jobs. It's great on your CV. Really good.
I think that's a really important message, Talia, because ultimately, I appreciate you'd worked with Watford while you're at university, again, some of it, and
Yeah.
then you'd had your voluntary experience, but that made you an obvious candidate for them, but also maybe other teams if you'd applied for others, and
Yeah.
that bit of paper to show that you're academically smart, and obviously you are very with the first, but the practical experience is what makes you valuable. And I certainly know that from
Mm-hmm.
a wide range of university degrees, that when you have experience, you're a much more attractive graduate employee than
Definitely.
people who have maybe just been very, very book smart, which is hugely admirable and hugely important. But if you haven't
Yep.
applied it ever before, you're more of a risk.
Definitely, because it's all well and good being able to talk the talk, but you need to be able to walk the walk as well, as cliche as it is, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. The kind of one of the points that you touched on was your background in not actually being into fitness, particularly as a young girl, and having that kind of challenging experience of an eating disorder at a young age, and the impact that would have had. Do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about what went on during that period, and then how you moved through that and the lessons that it's taught you now that make you such a strong individual?
Yeah, sure. So I danced growing up, and that is a very kind of, in my opinion, can be a very toxic environment. Obviously everyone will be slightly different, but I know the majority of people that I've spoken to from all over the country through Instagram that danced as a young female, it can be a very kind of physique, appearance, aesthetic focused industry. Because if you're going to be a backing dancer for someone on X Factor, they want you to look a certain way. And so more often than not, which is something I can kind of tie in with bodybuilding, you will be judged on how you look, which is why I would never advocate stepping on stage, but that's a different story. So I think from being so young, I started dance when I was like 3, 4, up until my teenage years. This was a big focus on my life. Dance teachers, they put pressure on you, your friends, you're often competing with the people that you dance with. So there's just this whole thing of you need to be skinny and you need to eat a certain way, you need to look a certain way, and your hair always needs to be done, and your makeup and all this stuff, which I don't do anymore. But so I think that kind of was a big factor in kind of contributing towards this thing I developed with food. And I got an injury, which meant I couldn't dance for like 6 months. I ruptured my groin, which was lovely. And so then I was like, okay, I'm not dancing, so therefore I need to restrict my food a little bit so that I don't gain weight whilst I'm not dancing. And I have the most addictive personality ever. If I do something or say I'm going to do something or start something, I can't just dabble. So this kind of started as, right, I'm just going to eat less, but I would eat nothing. And then from there, it kind of just got worse and worse. So it was never really like a sit down. And I don't think for anyone, they think I'm going to give myself an eating disorder. It just kind of spiraled from that time onwards.
Can completely understand that. And I think what you're saying, there's that pressure in your body image from such a young age to look a certain way. With an addictive personality particularly, there's probably elements of that personality that have driven you to be very successful with your large Instagram following, with your successful career in performance analysis. But there's equally things that personality can be channeled into, which cause you significant problems from a health perspective. And
yeah, for sure.
What was the way forward then, and what kind of age did you start to think maybe I need some help with this?
So I think I was around 18, and I was having a low blood sugar, which is part of the diabetes. And for that, you need to treat a low blood sugar with glucose and slow acting carbohydrates after as like a follow-up. And I remember sitting there and crying my eyes out because the thought of eating something was so horrible and scary for me. The concept was making me feel like physically sick. It gave me like a panic attack. I started having all this anxiety, and the only other option to not treat a hypo is to go into a coma. And so that to me was like, okay, this is literally life and death now, because my fear of food is not allowing me to treat my diabetes, which is obviously going to have awful consequences. So it was that day that I'm bad at talking about my emotions, so I wrote a letter to my parents and said, like, I need to stop this, and it went from there.
Yeah, that's incredible. I think just for some background, I don't know if we touched on that, but Talia has type 1 diabetes, which we'll go into a bit more detail on later on, some of the information around that and some of the misconceptions around that as well. But ultimately, by not having a good relationship with food, it was endangering your ability to treat that your T1. And incredible for probably your parents to even watch that as well and maybe read that letter back to realize that our child is endangering herself, and it's time to support her through this.
Yeah, exactly. I think for parents it's a horrible thing to go through, because I think a parent will always think they can fix their child, or at least hope that they can. And for someone with any form of mental health illness, you really can't. It's completely on that person to want to make the recovery. And so for my parents to go through that, I know it wasn't pleasant at all, and probably just as painful to them as it was me. But yeah, they were good throughout it. They were supportive. I think there was a lot of arguments because nobody really understands it unless you've been through it, and they can't. It's quite, I think, a taboo subject, so there's not a lot of information surrounding it, and so people just wonder, like, well, why doesn't she just eat? And it's obviously isn't. You can't just.
Yeah, I fully understand that, and I think even more so 5 years ago, people would have had less of an understanding of eating disorders.
100%.
And I remember at school, like, there was girls that were very thin and people would call them like anorexic and just throw the term around, and or they'd be like, oh, she's bulimic, she makes herself sick. And you just didn't know what that actually meant. And now there's so much information, hopefully, about things like calorie balance, that we can understand that actually it's because they're not fueling their body with enough calories to even maintain weight, and not just to lose weight, but to drastically continue to get smaller, even when they're at a weight that means that their body isn't functioning as well. Maybe they have problems with their hormones, their hair health, their nail health, everything like that, which comes with a very severe eating disorder. So you've written this letter to your parents at 18. You've realized that I'm perhaps endangering my health, at risk of going into coma due to not treating my diabetes properly. How do you move forward? How do you recover, Talia? What are the kind of main steps?
So I was very fortunate to be able to seek therapy. My dad did this for me. I did try to do it through the NHS to start with, but the waiting list is ginormous. And obviously this is something they wanted to kind of get started with ASAP. So I had a therapist, and I did CGT. I had that for quite some time. And to be honest with you, it wasn't, I didn't find it helped very much to start with. And I think this is because I was in a place where, yes, I wanted to recover and I wanted more for my life, but my head wasn't 100% in it. Like, it wasn't. And I was saying to people what they wanted to hear, but I wasn't necessarily following through with actions. And so I was going for weekly weigh-ins, and I was still shoving stones down my trousers and putting them in my pockets. And my dad actually, after a weigh-in, I'd gained weight, and I knew exactly how much weight I needed to put into my pockets to make it look like I'd gained weight on the scale, when realistically I was still losing weight. And we came out, and my dad was like, oh, well done, like you put a couple of pounds on, and he put his arm around me. And I was a dancer, so I had these ankle weights. You warm up with them to help with flexibility. and I had them in my, like, around my waist, and my dad put his arm around me and he felt them, and he didn't say anything at that moment because he knew, like, my mum was so happy, and I think he didn't think it was the right thing to do at the time. And so I think then my dad kind of realised, okay, it's not as plain sailing as we think.
I think, coming on that, Talia, I think that would have been incredibly hard for your parents, but it's incredibly hard to you because you never want to lie to your parents or to let them down, and that's your condition and your mental health doing that. It's not you doing it from a place of, I want to deceive my parents or I want to trick the therapist and the system. It's a case of, I don't want to eat this food, like, I want to get smaller, I'm not small enough yet, or whatever the self-talk in your head is that has developed over that number of years. And I think my understanding of this is purely through people like yourself and good sources on Instagram and people being open about it, which is so important, and kind of spot those red flags. And I've certainly seen people with maybe not eating disorders, but disordered eating behaviors. And maybe there's things that I've done through bodybuilding and fitness that people would say that's really strange, and that you do certain things and you never compare it to something as challenging as you what you went through. But it's very, very common for people to develop very strange relationships with food, and for you to move past that isn't something that happens overnight.
Absolutely not. No. So here's the thing, I really think that the fitness industry kind of, because people wear a pair of gym leggings and a sports bra and they take pictures for Instagram, that normalizes an unhealthy relationship with food, whether that be people eating clean Monday to Friday and then completely binging at the weekend. That's not a normal way to behave. Or whether it's people kind of doing that whole 5-2 diet, it's not normal. Or people completely restricting their food because they know they'll binge in the evenings. Like, just because someone is #fitness, it doesn't make that normal, and that's a massive problem, I think, within our industry.
Yeah, I've seen you speak about this and address it, and it's actually it definitely ruffles a few feathers, because just by nature of having larger profiles and larger reach, you connect with a lot of people in the fitness space, and they from a good place, they want to get involved with your profile, they want to support you and you want to support them. But sometimes messaging is just like not quite right for what sits with you, and I've certainly seen that from your profile, and you can speak from experience from that perspective on social media. So we've got to a stage where things aren't quite plain sailing with your recovery. Was there a particular turning point where things started to get better and you felt that in that internal dialogue you were having with yourself that I actually really want to, I'm going to recover, I'm going to?
Yeah, so I was actually on a family holiday. It was the year after first year of university. Things had been up and down the whole time. My parents were very skeptical about letting me go in the first place. But I said it was something I needed to do. Like, I needed to get away from the whole like dance industry and all that kind of thing. So we were on this family holiday, and that triggered a relapse for me. It was like an inclusive holiday, so that was food everywhere, everything revolved around food, big breakfast, lunches, ice cream, dinner, drinks, everything. And it was probably, in hindsight, too much at that time for me to handle, because I was still in this kind of strange little place. And yeah, so that completely sent me backwards all the way back. So from there, at that point, that was a real like, okay, this is too much, I'm not getting the most out of my life. My diabetes is up and down. My friendships, like, I'm pushing people away because I don't want to spend time with people, because everything revolves around food as a teenager or a young adult. And yeah, so from that moment, that was inside me when I wanted 100% committed to recovery. And even from that, it wasn't linear. Of course, I was up and down days, and I often share transformation pictures, and I think people assumed I went from A to B overnight or in the quick space or in a quick amount of time, but it wasn't. There was a lot between then. But yeah, that was the real, I'm gonna do it. And that's when I started training and getting into lifting and having my protein shakes.
That was the turning point where internally you decided it was definitely happening as well. It wasn't just a case of, oh, I'm going to try and get better. It was, I'm going to get better.
Yeah.
And I appreciate better might sound like the wrong term sometimes, but that is what you were doing, because
Yeah,
if you hadn't have
100%.
addressed that, your diabetes would have potentially caused you some real problems.
Yeah,
So you got into lifting and
I did.
and training, and I noticed this a lot on social media. Girls who have a background, in particular females particularly, have a
Yeah.
background in eating disorders. They tend to really enjoy
Mm-hmm.
weight training once they realize what it's all about. And
Yeah.
some of the and this again goes down to body image, some of the best female physiques that you see in terms of
Mm-hmm.
like aesthetic and what girls would call
Aesthetic.
body goals
Yeah.
often come from ED backgrounds, and they
Yeah.
build fantastic physiques off the back of probably some of the personality traits that they have that are related
Yeah.
to ED, in terms of maybe a little bit addictive, in terms of a passion for training. What did
Yeah.
it look like for you, Talia?
So I think because of obviously what I was studying, there was a lot of S&C involved, and kind of functional training anyway.
Right.
So I did have, I guess, enough information to train effectively from the go, which I think a lot of people kind of miss out on, because as we dive into weight training, there is a lot of, I don't want to name any names, but like Instagram workouts, which people will just blindly go in and follow because they're not quite sure on how to do it yet.
Yeah.
And I think we all learn as we go, at least most people do. But yeah, because of that, I knew I needed to go in with a structure, and kind of follow a program. I knew about progressive overload. So I had kind of the fundamentals there anyway, which was great. And I wish everyone could go in with that knowledge. And this whole aspect of, okay, I'm training to be strong and to feel healthy and to feel good, rather than I'm going to do endless hours on the treadmill because I want to be skinny, was just, I can't even describe it. It felt like so uplifting, and to know that, okay, I'm eating to fuel my workouts because I want to be able to train to the best of my ability, compared to looking a certain way, is just life-changing, really life-changing, which is why I understand that everyone has their own ideas about competing, but to me, you're eating to not fuel your performance, but to like look somewhat desirable, which is, you're messing with everything, your body, your hormones, your hair, like you were talking about. It's literally, you're getting the symptoms of what you would get from an eating disorder, but because you're putting a tan on bikini, that kind of, it's like organized eating disorder. And I do not know one person who has come out of a show successfully without destroying something to do with their body image, their self-worth, their relationship with food. Like,
Yeah, I can
so I've gone on a tangent now.
I don't think you've gone on a tangent at all. And I think you come from a place where you know where that can lead. And like you say, you've got a lot of anecdotal examples who you've spoken to people that have struggled with it. And you see the stories all the time, like, oh, after my first show, I gained 5 kilos in a week. And if you're a 45, 50 kilo female competing in bikini, that's like 10% of your weight.
Relative, yeah.
That's relative to your weight gain, and you're going to look completely different to how you looked at
Of
the start
course
of
you
your
are.
prep even. Yeah, so
Yeah, because you're going to be so sensitive to everything now in terms of how your body responds to the intake of what you're putting in your body. You're going to be so sensitive to it.
and if anyone understands insulin, it's you. So if somebody's putting in really high, and you see this with the kind of post-show binges, and I've got friends on the male side who have said that they loved the process and the journey to a large extent, but afterwards, like, they were having like a bowl of Oreos with milk for their breakfast, and he was like, what is wrong with me? And that sounds a really horrible thing to say, but he was like, oh, this is just this is just terrible. And it's
Yes.
definitely not for everyone. It's not something I've ever done or
No.
I don't think I will ever do. I mean, I've been
Hmm.
very, very lean before, but never been
Yeah.
like pushed it to maybe that little extra couple weeks to
Yeah.
get there.
And I think with you, a great thing you always talk about is that whole, you don't have the influencer's version of balance. You have a real balance. It's not something, it's not a disordered behavior with food with pretty pictures in a nice little box. It's real balance. Like, you know, you can do certain things. I think, again, because we understand energy balance and how it works.
Yeah, I think just on that kind of social media thing where you know, and I know one of our kind of mutual acquaintances who know a lot about eating disorders actually get messages from girls who portray themselves as this pinnacle of health and fitness, who are displaying really disordered behaviors, but they're in your DM because you understand it, and they're asking you questions about what they're doing, and the message you have to tell them almost is that is an eating disorder and you need to seek help. And
Get help.
probably some of what you're putting out on Instagram is not helpful. Like, I certainly see people like maybe bragging about eating a certain thing on the weekend, and like you say, that kind of 5-2 approach where, oh, Saturday's cheat day, and you're thinking, oh, like terms like that for starters can
Yeah.
be extremely unhelpful, particularly for people that can be triggered by that. Like from your background, you would potentially be triggered by somebody thinking
Yeah,
Saturday's a free for all.
exactly. And I think when you have openly talked about your past with eating disorders, you are then putting yourself out there as someone who may be an inspiration for a person going through an eating disorder right now. So you need to understand that everything you're saying could be affecting vulnerable people. It's like with my type 1, for instance. Yes, I will tell you I have bad days, but I would never kind of tell you how to manipulate your insulin, because I know there's people who are following me that could be triggering for. So I think you need to be so aware if you're going to take on the responsibility of being an influencer, whether you've got 1,101, 100,000, 1 million followers, you are making that commitment to trying to help people in your situation. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose we've fallen into that conversation then about T1 and the niche that you have on Instagram. Obviously, there'll be a lot of people that follow you for general fitness information, but
yeah,
ultimately, a large percentage of your following will be there to get that niche specialist advice from somebody who has the same condition as them, a very under talked about and misunderstood condition. And I will level with you and tell you that, and I've told you this before,
yeah,
I had no idea about T1, T2 in terms of diabetes. I just had heard of diabetes as a
yeah.
whole.
It's
The
an
media,
umbrella.
the media portrayal of it. And let's address some misconceptions to get us started then, Miss Bentley.
Yeah, so diabetes as an umbrella is because we are either insulin resistant or insulin dependent, which is where the two kind of fall together. You can have gestational diabetes, which you get during pregnancy, which then you will require insulin in an injection form. So in essence, you're type 1. But it can go after pregnancy, it depends. But the two main types are type 1 and type 2. So type 1 is the one I have and I advocate on my Instagram. So it's an autoimmune disease. So they think they're not 100%, but it's pretty, you would say, it comes from having a virus. And the way a type 1's immune system worked was to destroy our healthy cells, damaging our pancreas, so it no longer works. We don't produce insulin on our own at all, unless you're in the honeymoon phase, which will die out after 3 to 6 months post-diagnosis. Type 2 is where the stigma comes from, because this is what you could get from lifestyle, smoking, weight can be environmental factors, and it can be genetic / hereditary, type 2, not type 1. Type 1 isn't hereditary, which I think is a big misconception. People think it is, but it's not. So yeah, people will say, oh, I'm having a cake, this is diabetes on a plate. Or they'll have a binge day and they're like, oh my God, I'm going to get diabetes now, which is why I get so annoyed speaking about this. And what they don't understand is they're like, oh, it's only a joke, take the joke. It's like, no, because my life is dependent on everything I do. Every decision I make involves my diabetes. So you try living with that and then someone make a joke about it. It doesn't run. It makes me angry, which is why I will always correct someone when they talk about it in that way.
Yeah, exactly. I think that on a top level, that's addressed the kind of common misconceptions with T1 versus T2. And like I say, T2 is the one where really we need to be looking at lifestyle changes in order to prevent and recover from diabetes. T1 is something that is with you for life, and it's a non-curable disease that there's no official cure for. There is only treatment and management.
Yes, 100%.
There we go. I've been reading your captions closely, haven't I?
Wow, you really have. That was impressive off the bat as well. I will confirm there is no script.
And I think the important thing that you share on your social media for so many people that have this condition is that you can still live that fitness lifestyle, but you have to be hyper conscious about how you do it.
Yes.
But one of the things I find interesting as well is that almost elements of the fitness lifestyle are extremely beneficial to management of your treatment, and that's like the holistic fitness lifestyle. I'm not talking about hood up 5 a.m. on the Stairmaster getting ready for your bikini show where 3 people are going to show up for your class. I'm talking more about that kind of strength training, understanding what your calories are, eating protein, and looking after yourself. Do you want to share some of the general advice that you tend to point a lot of girls that contact you about T1 initially?
So first off, injecting insulin is not the cause for you gaining weight. It's not. We're replacing a hormone which our body doesn't produce. Everyone in the world needs insulin, whether it's artificially injected or whether your pancreas is functioning. So insulin isn't the reason you're gaining weight. The only way you can gain weight is the same as everyone else, is to put yourself in a calorie deficit. It's made a little bit harder because of type 1, because we'll hypo when we exercise, or we'll have high blood sugars when we exercise. That's where the control comes in, which is so hard because it's different for every single person, and everyone will react slightly different to exercise. Like you will, like anyone will, with a functioning pancreas or not. Our body will the internal systems in our body will work slightly differently, which is something you really need to understand and learn about how your body works. So you can't come onto my page and copy what I do, which is why I never share it, because that's not going to work for you. I can only tell you the systems we need to put in place to get you to a place where you can manage your diabetes. So the main things I would say when starting out is understanding what your pre and post levels need to be in terms of blood sugar. So you want to do a test before, during, and after your workouts, and this is always, so regardless of whether you've got a CGM or not, you want to have your tests done. And then I always say to people, visualize it. So do it for 2 weeks and write them on top of each other so you can see, okay, this is what's happening. Every time I finish my exercise, I'm going low, and then 2 hours later, I'm going high. Okay, mid-session, I'm going to need 2 glucose tablets. Post-session, I'm going to need 2 units of insulin. That is your answer. It's not as black and white as that, of course. There's so many different
But that's an example, isn't it, Talia? That's an example.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So understanding carbohydrate counting is important, obviously, for dosing your insulin. This is going to change your ratios because your sensitivity will increase after you've exercised. So carb counting, pre, post, and during your workout levels, and kind of knowing what system you need to put in place to amend that to fit your exercise.
That's a brilliant insight, Talia. And I guess that segues us a little bit into some of the ways that you have provided people with top level advice about how to manage their glucose on a daily basis and across the day. And again, it links into that kind of level of advice that's actually relevant for everyone to manage. Now, I appreciate a lot of people aren't necessarily managing their glucose or needing to in the same way if they don't have the condition, but ultimately it's good health advice for everyone. And I think it was one of your posts, I think you listed 10 ways, and every single one of them I was sitting there thinking, if everyone did that, we'd just be healthier overall rather than just managing your glucose.
Right, 100%. I think everything that diabetics do, it's a pain because we have to do them, but then in general advice, the actual things we do to manage our levels, not the kind of giving the insulin and testing our blood, but the things that help it could be beneficial to everyone for sure, because it bodes a healthier lifestyle for us and the general public. So there was a study, we love a study. So they took 3 different groups. They were all type 1s. They had a group of people who were sedentary all day, a group of people who stood up and sat down every hour, and then a group of people who walked around the room, went out, came in. And even the people who just stood up and sat down compared to the people who were sat all day had better blood sugar management. So just being active and getting your NEAT in, taking the steps, parking your car a little bit further away, making sure you go on a walk, trying to walk more places. It was all very beneficial to diabetics, but like you say, also the general public. Everyone could do with walking a bit more.
That's what I love about that, because we overall in the UK, where most of the audience will be listening from, we live this incredibly sedentary lifestyle. So appreciate outside of the COVID period, most people commute to an office. They either in a car, on a train, a bus, whatever they do. They then sit at their desk from 9 until lunchtime.
Yeah.
The majority will either nip down and get a sandwich and then go sit back down and eat it, and then be at their desk until 5 o'clock, or they will go through to the canteen and eat their food and then go back to the desk until 5 o'clock, and then they'll get the train home. And some people will go and exercise, which is an hour a day, and then they'll go and sit on the couch for the rest of the time, or some people won't do that exercise at all. So you can see there that in terms of us moving, we have to actually make a conscious effort to acquire any form of NEAT or movement. And there's the average step count in the UK, well, the last time I checked, which was around November time last year, when I did a post about it on Instagram in horror, was 4,000 steps. And no wonder we've got an obesity crisis when people aren't moving at all.
The reason that all those girls have to activate our glutes before we train legs is because we're sat down all day. Like, that's why our muscles aren't engaged, because we're not using them. So there's so many benefits to moving more, whether you're diabetic or not. I think it was James Smith who said, if your dog was overweight, you would walk it less and feed it. You would walk it more and feed it less. So why do we try and implement all these skinny teas and injections to the general population?
Yeah, it's incredible that we have that kind of conversation. And just on that kind of things that you would do for your dog, one of my favorite lessons from Jordan Peterson's book, which I read last year, was follow the advice that you would give to a friend. I think it's rule 2 or 3, and it spoke to me so much, because I think they did an assessment in the USA where effectively the prescription that your dog or your pet gets given by the vet, you make sure the pet follows it to the letter. You make sure your child from the doctor follows it to the letter. But I think the percentage of people in that study that follow their own prescription from the doctor is frightening. They stop after 2 weeks. They don't finish the whole course of antibiotics or whatever it is they're getting treatment for. And that links in so clearly to health and fitness advice. If your dog, for example, like you said, was heavily overweight, you would reduce its calories, you would increase its movement, you would see it lose weight. But instead, if you look at yourself and you think, no, that's not me, it must be this high sugar that I'm eating, or it must be the fact that I'm insulin resistant, but you don't have any diagnosis for that. And it's incredible. It's incredible how we don't take our own advice or our own logic.
Definitely. And most people, I'm probably going to get a bit of hate for this, but people will love to give themselves an excuse as to why they're not doing something. Whether your homework has not been done, or an assignment's not been finished, or you woke up late because you went to bed late, like, people will love to blame it on something else, whereas realistically, you yourself are the only person in the world who can do something about it. So people need to get out of that mentality of, I'm going to start on Monday, or I'm going to start next week, or it's because this happened. Like, sorry that happened, move on, because otherwise you're going to be in the same position next week and the week after and the week after, you know.
Talia, don't worry about getting any hate for that. You're among friends here. This audience are all about personal responsibility. I think it links in, like, so we've spoken about one particular area of managing your glucose. Some of the other areas that I'd taken notes were hydration. So yet another one where general population wise, we don't drink water. One of my favorite colleagues that I worked with in my first graduate job used to laugh at how often I went to the bathroom. And I said to her one day, I was like, I go because I have like 4 liters of water a day or whatever. And when I wake up after 9 hours sleep, I have like a pint and a half of water with my supplements. And she was like, a pint and a half of water? I don't drink that a day. And I was like, oh, what do you drink? And she wrote down, she was like 2 cups of tea, two Pepsi Max, and like a coffee in the afternoon. And I was like, no wonder, one, you're pumped full of caffeine, but two, which I know you're not going to criticize, Callie. I know that. I know you love your caffeine, but she's getting no water in terms of hydration. So if as a general population person, really not looking after herself, but as a type 1 diabetic, disastrous behavior.
100%. As a diabetic, you will most likely always have a small amount of ketones in your urine. The severity of them will depend. If you've got high blood sugars, then you'll have a lot, and that can send you into something called DKA. But you want to keep them as low as possible. They're obviously super bad for your overall health. And the best way to flush these out, apart from having good in-range blood sugar levels, is water. So you want to keep them out of your system. You really don't want them. You can get ketone strips, or you can have them in your test blood sugar monitors. If you're listening to this and you're diabetic and you don't know how to test them, you can just get them on prescription. But yeah, hydration is so important. I can't emphasize it enough. Stay hydrated. There is an equation, I can't remember it off the top of my head. I think it's 0.024 divided by your body weight in kg. I'll message you the equation after. You can leave it below or something. It gives you how much water you need to drink in liters a day for your body weight and stature.
That's brilliant. I think overall everyone kind of, or not everyone, but the vast majority of people underhydrate and underlook after themselves.
Yeah, you won't perform as well if you train, if you lift or any sort of training. You will not perform as well if you're not hydrated.
Well, think about the percentage of our muscles that are water, or our bodies are water. And like, one of the things people ask you on Instagram when you take a good photo as a guy is, how do you look so pumped and full, bro? by drinking lots of water. Hydrate. Like, your muscles just swell up like water. And and
a few jelly babies.
That's it. That's the key. So that leads us on to food, Talia. And two of the things is, the first one is more soluble fiber, isn't it? And the second is more lower GI foods. So do you want to explain one, what that means, and two, maybe actionable steps that both relate to people with diabetes, but also just general pop as well?
Sure. Yeah. So in terms of soluble fiber, you've obviously got 2 types of fiber, but your soluble is going to help you digest food better and go through the system improving everything. So in terms of why this helps with a diabetic person, it increases your sensitivity to insulin, which is great because you're not going to get that spike in blood sugars. A way to prevent this is to pre-bolus, but you're best just to not have it. We can kind of stabilize our blood sugars as a steady line by incorporating foods like this and staying active. So you don't want to kind of go up and then down. So things like broccoli, fiber one, brownies are great if you've got a sweet tooth. Pulses, lentils, kind of anything that is sounds healthy, a healthy veg, the greens, spinach. And it's just, it will kind of, rather than keep going up and down, staying in range, it's going to keep you steady. Your low GI foods, so your low glycemic index foods, is going to pretty much do the same thing. You can get low GI bread, which is great if you're diabetic, really good, because like I say, it's not going to cause that spike in blood sugars. You can get that anywhere, it will say it on the label, but it's just the spike that a lot of people don't see if they've not got a CGM, because you're testing after meals, so you don't see what's going on in between them. Is going to increase your HbA1c, which is your overall blood sugar levels, and you don't want a high one of those because that's when you're going to start getting complications. So they're your two kind of go-to foods to try and incorporate with each meal, because that is going to help with the whole meal. It's going to kind of bring it together to not cause that spike. So even if you are having things that are slightly high in sugar, this is going to help with the digestion of that food and keep the levels steady.
And in terms of for general population, one of the kind of common approaches that sometimes fitness people will have pre and post workout, predominantly post workout, tends to be higher GI foods in terms of, because as somebody with a fully functioning pancreas, your levels are still elevated after you train. And I remember as a young guy in the gym being told that have my protein shake, but also I can have like maybe some sweets with it. Maybe a banana is high glycemic index. My cereal, anything that was tended to be kind of less quote unquote clean was a good time to have that. Is that the case for somebody that has diabetes? Is there more opportunity for them to have foods like that after they train, or is it a case of limiting those throughout the day?
So post workout, if you lift, this is going to release cortisol, and that is going to spike your blood sugars. So most people will find that they're slightly higher in terms of what their blood sugar is post workout, but then there's usually a delayed effect. So you'll find 2 or 3 hours later you're extremely sensitive to insulin and you're finding you're hypoing. So for a diabetic, it's going to be better to take advantage of that window 2 to 3 hours post workout rather than immediately after.
So it differs in that respect, which is, I think, is important, because I certainly know that in terms of things like recovery and muscle protein synthesis and all these kind of fitness bingo terms it's that kind of post workout window where once you're kind of somewhat settled and you're kind of in a more parasympathetic state, you can take advantage of that window. But if you've got type 1, then it's better to delay that to the 2-3 hours to then have your your more kind of higher GI,
high sugar, high carb.
High sugar. Yeah, I was going to say naughtier foods, depending on what what terms people use. Brilliant, Talia. And one of the kind of things that links in as well, finally, is things like managing your stress and improving your sleep. Now, if that's not something that everyone should be addressing, and I don't know what is, but what are the kind of key things that you would discuss on that topic, Talia?
So again, for a diabetic, but also the rest of the world, your stress and your sleep is going to affect your life a lot. Especially, I don't think people realize in terms of performance. So there's this stigma that if you eat carbs after 7, you'll gain weight. It's not that at all. that when you eat your calories is completely up to you. But there has been multiple studies done which show if you have less sleep and more stress in your life, you will usually eat more, consume more, drink less, have less time for yourself. And so your progress, or you might find you're struggling to lose weight if that's your goal. And I think not just in terms of a performance view or aesthetic, it's so important. It will improve your quality of life by 1,000,000% if you're sleeping and you're not stressed, because you just feel better. So things that have helped me with that have been journaling before bed. Give myself half an hour of, no matter what my day has been like or what I'm doing, I have half an hour of me time before I go to sleep. I'll read, I'll write, I'll just have nice relaxing music on and completely let myself chill out. I think if you live a fast life, no phone. Try and limit screen time before bed 100%.
I love that advice, and it definitely lowers stress as well. And I've found that, appreciate, like, this sounds a bit daft, but with our Instagram DMs, the way they can get, and I know yours are far crazier than mine in terms of the questions you get in the volume as well. It can be very consuming, and if you're like on, which would be the term I would use for your mind, answering these like repetitively before you go to sleep, or posting more content or writing content for the next day, or whatever you're choosing to do, or even just in a normal setting, texting your friends or texting your partner, whoever it is,
scrolling through.
Your mind is on and you're still digesting that information later on. So I'm like you, I have that hard stop on my phone. I try to make it 9 o'clock, and then I've got my time to myself to read. And I've started journaling now as well. And I joked about this on the podcast with Johnny Rose. We're both kind of white middle class guys from Glasgow who it's not really expected that we would want to write about our thoughts and feelings unless we were authors of books or something like that. But instead, we both use the 6-minute diary, and it's been a great entry point to journaling. It's been a great entry point to it, and I'm looking forward to looking back on it in like 6 months, 8 months, 10 months time, and seeing what I wrote. But also, I know that the quality of my sleep, particularly during a period like lockdown where just naturally we're more stressed, there's more uncertainty than ever before. We still don't know when our beloved gyms are going to open. We don't know when we can go on holiday, or all these different things which appreciate are trivial compared to some things that go on, but they are still stressors on everyone's everyday life. So definitely journaling during this period has been massive for me, and I know you've always espoused the benefit of that as well.
Writing something down rationalizes you with yourself, because if you're having 100 thoughts in your head and then you write them down or you say them out loud to yourself, you're like, probably been overthinking that one. Even if like you're going through a period of binge eating and you are like, okay, so I'm literally about to drive to Asda and spend £50 on food and eat it all in one go, you'll be like, okay, I've just talked myself through that one, probably not the best idea. So voice noting apps are great because you can kind of talk to yourself and hear yourself say some of the things that are going on, because we all have them. We all have crazy thoughts. I do all the time, but as long as you can.
I've not thought of a voice noting app before, but that's certainly the same principle, isn't it? And although we've joked before, when I try and send voice notes, Talia, my thumbs are too fat, so it cuts off after 9 seconds on WhatsApp when I'm trying to get something arranged with Talia. But it's a disaster.
So funny.
Last thing I wanted to touch on you with, and we've probably spoken about it throughout this podcast, was utilizing the platform that you've built for a really positive message to try and share that. And I appreciate we have actually discussed a lot of that already, but are there some sort of principles that you try to make sure are in place in your account and that you want to make sure they're going forward?
So I think anyone who's got Instagram, Twitter, any form of social media, this is your app and it's your space. So you have on there who you want to have on there. You have no obligation to follow anyone. You have no obligation to interact with anyone. If someone is making you feel bad, you have the power to unfollow them without feeling any guilt. It's not always personal. Maybe you started your journey and you were like, oh, this person's cool. And now you've evolved a little and you don't gel with that person anymore. It's like a relationship. You would end it. So you can unfollow people and make your space exactly how you want it. And Instagram is a clever app. Its algorithm works in a way that the people you engage with are going to come up on your feed more. They're going to come up in your explore page. So you need to fill it with people that you take something from. Because otherwise it's going to become very draining and you're going to not be bothered. If you're trying to create, if you're wanting to kind of grow an audience, you're not going to be as motivated if you're spending time on something that you don't enjoy. So that would be my main thing. And then in terms of actually growing your platform, you as a person have things that make you you. So dial in on that. Whether you have a hobby, whether it's something that you're really good at or it's something you enjoy doing or you're trying to work on, that's your journey and that's what someone out there will be interested in. Whether it's a lot of people or a small group of people, you're effectively trying to inspire people. So even if it's one person you've made an impact on, that's a big thing. So be true to yourself, because everyone can see through people that are fake and transparent.
That's a huge point, and it comes through eventually, and you can see that eventually in people that maybe aren't authentic when it comes to that call to action, and they ask somebody to either support something that they're really pleased with launching, like an ebook or a guide or a podcast or a project or a swipe up link for a book or anything like that. It doesn't go well. Whereas the people that have been true to themselves and have always spoken their truth and tried to support people in the best way that they can, when they put a call to action, people respond to it because it's not a surprise. It's not a case of, why are you doing that now? And if we go back to that first point you made about filtering your feed, we definitely can choose what we consume. And you and I have spoken about this offline before, where particularly when you're trying to grow an audience, you can sometimes fall into that space where you engage with a lot of people in order to get that principle of reciprocity where they engage back. So your posts are popping off with lots of comments and lots of likes and be quite unhealthy. And I know that was something that you took a step away from, despite the fact that you have this large, and the term influencer isn't going away, so we're going to use it, influencer platform with like 40,000 followers on there who are following your stuff. But you took a step away from engaging with just everything and changed your approach, didn't you?
Yeah. I say something when I have something to say now. Whereas before I'd like, I need to think of a caption, like I need to be posting 5-6 times a week. I need to have something to say. These people are following me. I need to give them content. Now I will talk to you when I have something on my mind, because that is authentic and that is something that I need to get off my chest and I need to share with my followers and I want them to hear. And so people will listen more because I'm not just saying things for the sake of it anymore. You are hearing my real thoughts, things that I'm noticing and I want to talk to you about. Secondly, I'm not interested in commenting for commenting. I do not care if you comment on my post or not. It doesn't bother me. So I'm not going to sit and scroll through my feed and comment Queen and all these different people's posts because I want them to comment back on mine. I will sit on a Thursday night and catch up on all 17 of your posts and comment on them, and the ones that I'm like, yes, I love that one, I'll tell you because it's how I genuinely feel. I think I was getting to a stage where Instagram was taking up a lot of my time and I needed to really step back. And when I started my page, go back to that, because really that is something that people are really going to take away, is when they know it's come from a place where it's legit. It's something I've been thinking about.
100%. And the authenticity of the engagement that you and I have meant that when we spoke on the phone, on FaceTime or on this, it was real because we knew each other based on what we've said to each other. Whereas, and this is no way firing shots or calling people out, and we won't name any names, but there's loads of people that have commented on my post for like a year, 2 years, and it's just, they're just commenting so that I comment back, and it's just like,
do you think they've read one caption?
It's like, yes bro, flames, or you look sick lad, or like, oh, check you out, or something like that. And like, for all, like, appreciate you getting involved and you're trying to be supportive, and it's maybe coming from a fairly good place for them, but it's also coming from a place where they're
It's
just
selfish.
ticking a box. They're ticking a box. And it's quite funny, not to time date this too much, and this won't get released on the day that I've put this post up, but I posted 5 things I learned from posting 1,500 times on Instagram, and some of these will resonate with you. And one of them was, absolutely, people will comment on your posts who wouldn't say hello to you in the street just to be seen. And it's particularly bad in some sectors where it is, like you say, that yes queen thing. But if they were both training in the same gym, they wouldn't go over and say anything to each other. They wouldn't be like, oh, how are you? They might go over and get a photo together. That's how toxic it gets. And it's incredible how positive social media can be with the platform that you have, but equally around it, there can still be so much nonsense and noise that we have to try and separate ourselves from.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's so important to kind of take yourself out of that environment, because I know myself, I'm guilty of in times kind of scrolling through, just liking people's stuff because I felt like I had to keep this image up. But when I've realized, okay, people are still very interested in what I have to say regardless of what I'm doing, like, it's given me a lot more power. It's made me enjoy the app again. I don't see it as a chore anymore. It's back to being what it was, to help build my business, to connect with people like yourself who I actually have interest with, and I enjoy reading your content because you give me value. To, like, I'll read something and I'll think, yeah, I agree with that, or that's cool, or I'm gonna use that in my life, rather than commenting on someone's thing because I feel like I have to. I mean, there's times, I'm sure you have as well, you've opened up, you've said something that you wouldn't necessarily talk about easily, and someone's commented like, this is amazing babe, how cool, like, slay, and I'm literally like, I'd rather you didn't. I'd rather you scroll past my posts.
It was disingenuous. They just did it to tick a box, and that's unfortunate. In terms of
my friend, sorry, go on.
No, on you go, Talia.
My friend did a very heartfelt caption, and at the end she said, this is the test. If you read this comment, and then she did a specific emoji, the amount of people who just had like commented like, you're so amazing, you're so brave, you're so strong, but hadn't used the emoji, it was insane.
Yeah. That's the real test of your to be fair, your actual audience will read it. It's the people that are just connected with you to try and grow their own page, which get caught in that, which is quite funny. Speaking of authentic Instagrams, Talia, we'll wrap up there, but where can the people connect with you?
So my Instagram is T1 Bentley. Witty. And then my website is just that's my email. My website is talia.fitness. That's literally it. You just need to put that into the search bar. You can find my email on there. There's a submission page if you're interested in coaching. They're my 2 main port of calls.
Yes, I'll link them in the show notes. And I guess for context, we mentioned at the start you were an online coach, but you specifically coach diabetics. So all the knowledge bombs that have been dropped there, if you're somebody that has diabetes and that's resonated with you, then Talia is your girl for your support.
Yes.
And
I have a high-end ticket, which is one-to-one coaching, and then I have a middle ground ticket, which is like a group course, and then I have a third one on the way, which is going to be kind of like an off-the-shelf product, but that's coming soon.
Not only is she helpful, she knows how to sell as well, so that's good. Last thing to ask you guys, please take a screenshot of this, pop it in your Instagram story, tag Talia, tag myself. Please keep engaging with the podcast. The feedback so far has been amazing, and we are not stopping anytime soon. I will speak to you all again very, very soon.
Yeah, it's exciting.